There's a politician who has recently made a name for himself. It's a infamous name, nefarious name. This is George Santos. He recently became a Republican. Now, George Santos has been known to lie about everything, literally everything. This is the guy who lied about his background, his education. He said he claimed he was Jewish. People looked into it. Then they confronted him. They said, "Hey, you said you were of this ancestry," and he said, "Well, I'm Jewish," right? So this is the guy who lied about everything to become a congressman in the House of Representatives. And he's running as a Republican. I don't know his political stance because you can say you're a Democrat or a Republican, but what are the actual policies that you believe in? But he's a known liar. Now, he's being charged for fraud by the Department of Justice. They're tying him to a campaign finance violation, which I'll go into. George Santos has come out and said, look, I'm very upfront about lying. I'm upfront that I've lied about everything. And in fact, I'm just doing what every other politician is doing. All these other politicians, they lie to your face, but they say that they're telling you the truth. I'm upfront about it. I'm lying to you, but I'm telling you that I'm lying to you. That is George Santos's stance on where he's sitting in the current position. Now, in terms of the campaign finance violation, they're saying that because George Santos had been lying on his run to become a congressman, that now is frauding the American people because you're taking all of the things that you ran on, whether it's your background, your personal effects, your professional, career-wise, everything that you've been talking about, you're lying. And so all of those finances that were poured into your campaign are now unjustly poured into your campaign because they were all premised on a bunch of lies. So they're taking him lying and they're translating it to his campaign, and they're saying, because you lied, all of those funds are now void. And so you've committed fraud. Now that's a far stretch. It's a far stretch because lying is part of the First Amendment. Okay, whether something is true or not, it's different if you're slandering someone. Which, by the way, if you're slandering someone or you're committing libel against someone, that's a civil action. It's not a criminal action. So lying in itself is not unconstitutional. You have the right to lie. You have the right to say whatever you want, whether people agree with it or whether people don't agree with it. The point is to tie this to a campaign finance violation, which, by the way, most politicians break that campaign finance law. Most politicians, whether they're lying or not, they end up breaking that law. So to tie, a lot of these laws on the books are just there because 98% of the time they're not enforced. They're only enforced in selective prosecution. So when the current ruling regime, or really it's the same establishment, but when the ruling regime goes into people and they see political opponents who are a threat to their position in the hierarchy, they will take laws on the books and they will use that to selectively prosecute people, which you can't do that. That's unconstitutional because you're being selective. You're arbitrarily picking people because they're an opponent to you or they're a threat to you in some capacity. You have to apply the same rule of law to everyone. You can't just selectively apply it. So that's also an unconstitutional action for the DOJ to go after this one guy, even if he's lying, even if we don't condone it, even if he's, POS for doing what he did. You can't selectively pick him. You have to apply to all the other politicians, which we know the DOJ is not going to do that because there are a lot of politicians who align with the DOJ. And the DOJ is just made out of people. So however the DOJ leans, which it's mostly to the left, and there's a strong amount of people, let's say 60-70% of the people in the Department of Justice who lean to the left, and there are a significant amount of people in Congress who lean to the left, they align with each other. So naturally, they're going to go after this guy, George Santos, who's a Republican. Again, I haven't looked into whether or not he actually believes in Republican policies. There are a lot of Republicans, just like there are a lot of Democrats, who are just part of the status quo. They're just there because they're going to follow the general agenda, whatever the agenda is from the establishment, and they will just further that agenda through policy and regulation. Now, if we take a look at George Santos and we compare him to all the other politicians, he is right in a sense that he is overtly telling you that he's lying. Okay, he is lying. He will go out and lie, and then he'll say, "Oh yeah, I was lying about that." He is right in saying that all the other politicians, they lie to your face, but they don't tell you that they're lying. In fact, they double down and they say, "No, I'm not lying," or "I never said that." When in a lot of cases we have them on video or audio of politicians committing huge lies to the American public. Now, I will say, whether or not politicians lie, and most of them do lie, it's our job as we the people to vote these people in or kick these people out by voting other people in. So we the people have to have a certain type of discernment, a certain type of judgment to understand when someone is lying, to understand when someone is being authentic or genuine, to understand, okay, what is the track record of this guy? Did they do something before they were a politician? Were they in business? Did they build a business? Did they build multiple businesses? Did they have people who relied on them for jobs? Did they pay salaries? What did they do that was productive towards society? Okay, they have check marks on this background. A lot of these politicians are career politicians. They got in when they were young. They are very socialist in their ideologies, which again is anti-American, but it's also American to have the right to believe in any ideology. And they come in and they just extract from the American people by taxpayer money, and they push policies and regulation that doesn't serve the American public. It doesn't serve the general American interests. So we have to do a better job at vetting people who come into office. Now, I will recognize that there are a lot of people who just chase office. They will just chase being a senator or a congressman, they'll chase being a representative, because there's a type of power there. And maybe they can't get a job anywhere else. Maybe this is their way of kind of taking a shortcut to making some money. Fine, but it's still our job as we the people to understand. And by the way, there's a lot of other people who chase other institutions, financial institutions, education, academic institutions, because there's a type of power there. A lot of people will say, well, scientists generally are good people, they have good intentions, and there's no money in science, and there's no really power in science, so the people who are flocking to science, well, they're going to be genuine. That's not true, right? In every niche, there is power. There's a hierarchy in every niche. No matter how you want to boil it down, we are humans. Our species evaluates each other, especially men, in hierarchies, which means that there are levels to this game. So whether you're a scientist or whether you're an academic, there's still a whole world inside of academia or inside of science or big pharma or big med where people are ranked and they get paid more, or they get certain achievements, right? And that presents status in their niche, in that perspective. So we can't be naive to think that, well, humans in one niche are completely flawless. And so if we look at certain niches, those are the good people. Those are the proper people. In every niche, whether it's someone in a university campus, at a private school or public school, the dean, etc., or whether it's someone in I won't say pharma, because a lot of people know and understand that pharma is heavily corrupt, but a lot of people in different institutions, let's say hedge funds, although I could argue a lot of people may already understand that hedge funds are largely corrupt, but if you look at certain endowments, the Harvard institution and their endowments, like, there's money, there's power there. People chase those tops of hierarchies. A lot of people have malicious means when they're chasing those tops of hierarchies. The minority of people have good intentions. Intentions are kind of worthless because you have to match it with action. They have to be the proper action. You can have good intentions. Your ideology, your intentions may be good, subjective to you, but how you act, and is it empathetic towards other people, in the sense that other people are still retaining their rights, similar as to you would you retain your rights, that would be the right action. Okay, I'm going on a tangent, so let me go back to this. It's up to the American people to take a look at your politicians, whether it's people on the left, whether it's people on the right, determine who are the right candidates to represent you, because ultimately politicians are supposed to be representatives of we the people. Now, how we do the Senate and how we do the House, these are two different ways of doing it. The House is generally more for the population. The Senate is more for, you get two for every state. So it's slightly different. But you're putting someone in representation of you. You have to make sure that these are the right people. A lot of politicians are polished. They say what they think they should be saying. They try to toe the line. They don't say anything crazy. That's why you only have a few outsiders who are largely on the Republican side, who will say things that are largely unpopular but are best for the nation. And these people are often suppressed because that's not what all the other politicians are in line with. Because if they align themselves with the establishment, if, for example, you have Mitch McConnell, who says he's a Republican, but he wears a Ukraine tie and he supports the proxy war, which is costing us billions of dollars in taxpayer money, and it's funding a war that neither side needs to have, whether you're on the Eastern Front or the Western Front, and there's massive amounts of propaganda there. Someone like Mitch McConnell is just towing the establishment line. Him saying he's a Republican doesn't mean anything, right? So for you to constantly vote this guy in versus another person in your state, in your district, that's a type of atrocity. The vast majority of people are distracted, they're ignorant, they're uneducated, and I'm speaking not only from a general point of view, but specifically for cultural and political influence. A lot of people are too tied up in other distractions. Now, these distractions are designed on purpose to waste people's time. I'll give something simple. Not that we shouldn't have it, because everyone has the ability to make their own decision, but let's say we have TikTok. When people are on TikTok and they're scrolling and you get sucked into the algorithm, and the app is just like many other apps, it's psychologically designed to keep you in that system, and you're scrolling there for 2-3 hours. That's why if I'm ever on TikTok, I'm just there to post and I get off. If I'm doing some research, I'll stay on for a period of time and then I'm out. But a lot of people stay on for hours and they'll scroll. When you're doing that, you're wasting 2-3 hours a day. Those 2-3 hours a day, you add that up and you compound it over years. Obviously over the course of years, a new type of social media can come in. But if you're compounding that, you could be doing something productive in those 2-3 hours, whether it's research or understanding the world or looking into certain events. When you're distracted, and I'll use the old Roman saying that I use all the time, bread and circuses. This goes back very far. Okay, everyone knows the Roman Empire was thousands of years ago. Bread and circuses. You feed people up. Okay, you make them gluttonous, and you distract them. Circuses, gladiator games, chariot racing. You distract them. You feed them. They're very content. They're very satisfied by their innate proclivities, which are you want food, right? For the most amount of human history, historically speaking, the vast amount of human history, we've died from starvation. We've died from famine. So us finding food is very satisfying from a primitive point of view. Us being distracted and having things to do, things to work on, things to think about, that is short-term gratification instead of delayed gratification. Those are things that are we're very inclined to participate in those activities. So when you satisfy the masses with that, you ultimately have control over what they can and can't see. And that's why we have all these different apparati, which come in and they give you a very focused, narrow vision of what the world looks like. And even for people who may have the capacity for reasoning, logic, intelligence, and they could even maybe take data points and information and connect the dots properly, they often don't even get close to that point because they're so distracted. They're so distracted not only because you have to work a certain amount of hours per day to sustain yourself, but you also have family, you also have friends, social life, you have TV, you have so many things that are going on. I mention this from time to time, but when you have so many distractions, you ultimately become ignorant. Now, in this day and age, when you have books, you have the web, you can gain different perspectives, you can actually see the information, even though we're in the West, and we're in the West, we have a free and open society relative to other societies out there. There's still a ton of propaganda here, but we still have access. If you want to dig deep enough, we still have access to the truth. You have to dig, you have to filter, you have to go through a lot of content. And it's kind of like finding a needle in a haystack. But in other nations, you can't even find the needle in the haystack. At least here in America, you can find it. And that's still a big problem. It shouldn't be this difficult to find the truth, but it is because there are powers and interests that are working against you. That means if you're not spending time, energy, and effort to find the right perspectives, or just to gain perspectives in general, and to be able to gather different data and information and cross-reference them, cross-reference sources, if you're just turning on the news on TV and you're seeing what they're saying, and you're listening to what they want you to hear, you're not going to have the right worldview. And that actually affects your actions. So if you need to know where to invest your money, how to make money, how to start a business, these things compound over time. There are people in America who don't know how to start a business. There are people in America who don't know what to invest in. They think investing in NFTs is a smart, sound decision. That's very speculative, right? There are different productive assets you could put your money in that will yield you a ton of return where you don't even have to work a job in the next 5 to 10 years if you know how to do it properly. There are a lot of people out there who don't know anything other than working a 9 to 5. A lot of people don't even know how to budget their money, right? So there's a difference between the capacity to do something and the capacity to not do something, and then the intervention of the right information and the right knowledge, and then taking action on that knowledge. I say all that to say, if you have the desire, the willpower, the discipline, you can achieve a lot. And being able to make sound decisions where you could potentially be in a position of power and infiltrate these different areas, not just strictly politics, but everything is tied to politics. But if you can be at the top of a hierarchy in a certain institution, and you can work with other people who are at the tops of other institutions, and you can actually create positive change for the world or just your nation, or you can start locally, regionally, then your state, then the nation, then the world. You can expand it, and everyone has a different role. Some people are meant to make change in their local communities. Other people are meant to make change in their national communities, right? It is very different based off of who you are and what your proclivities are, what your vision is. But if you have any kind of talent or skill that you can cultivate, and you can get rid of these distractions. We don't need to have these stupid politicians who have no idea what they're doing other than just being professional liars. They understand that they need to manipulate the people. They don't need any skill. Their only skill they need is to lie to you in such a way that it comes off as authentic. If you look at the vast majority of these politicians and you corroborate even an ounce of the circumstantial evidence that goes against them, you can see that they're lying right to their teeth. You can see that they're lying to your face, and there's even evidence showing that what they're saying is not in alignment with their actions or the people who they're working with who are committing actions on their behalf. So when you look at that and you do an ounce of diligence and you compound that, we can actually have way better politicians in office. We can actually change this political system that would actually work for the American people. We started as a nation that had individual rights, individual freedoms for the vast majority of people. Obviously, we had changes, cultural changes, and right now, the vast majority of people can benefit, right? So you have, for example, Indians, Japanese, and Chinese, who have historically, in most recent times, been oppressed to such severe cases that they had nothing. They were, Japanese, after World War II, they were put into internment camps. Now, if you look at them, not just the Japanese, but all those other ethnicities, ethnic backgrounds that I mentioned, they make the most amount of money, even surpassing Caucasians. They make the most amount of money in the United States because there's opportunity here. So that's just the financial realm. I'm not saying that these people are politically savvy, they are maximizing their genetics in terms of looks, they have the right mentality about everything. I'm not saying that. They're maximizing their finances. That's where they're peaking out on. But if they can be as diligent as they've been, for the most part, to max out in that area by taking advantage of opportunity, we can also do that in so many other niches, politically, culturally, and these things matter because we don't have a country after a period of time if people keep wasting their lives with distractions and they let other people who are malicious come into these positions of power who ultimately make decisions on our behalf, and they make decisions that don't serve us. And so maybe we won't feel it in this generation, but the generations ahead will feel it, and it won't be pretty.